All our banter is gay.
Tyler.
Yeah.
How's it going?
Awful. It's I would say, at best, below par.
Okay.
Not in the sense of the game of golf, because below par would be great,
Mm-hmm.
but in the sense that par would be the norm, and we are below that in terms of positivity.
That's just what I like to hear. Well, I have a more important question for you.
Okay.
In that case, and that question should definitely lead into this one. What are you drinking?
Coffee. I am having coffee. There is a cup of coffee in front of me, and before this is done, I will have a different cup of coffee, because this cup of coffee will be gone.
So it's a different kind of things aren't going well then.
It's a part of this episode might be filmed on the toilet. Anyways, and you?
Oh,
He said politely.
I am actually drinking.
Don't say water.
I will not say water. I will say hot chocolate.
Oh, that doesn't sound bad.
Yeah, it's really nice. It's because it's annoyingly colder here than it is there for the second year in a row. And why on earth did I move to Oklahoma?
For their road systems.
No, it's not that.
Because they have a better state bird.
I don't know what the state bird is here, but we do have bald eagles here, so.
I started scrambling immediately to try to see what Oklahoma state bird was. And I gave up because I don't care either. It's in, well, like most things in life, I'm assuming something stupid like for a woman.
That's a strange bird.
No, there's not many of those around here.
You know what Indiana does have that Oklahoma doesn't, though?
There's got to be a few things.
Sassafras.
It's just like laying around.
No, it grows there. You guys have sassafras trees. Sassy-ass trees.
I thought you were saying you had sassafras trees.
Oh, no, Indiana does. Oklahoma does not.
I don't pay attention to the sassafras, so.
Tyler Moberly.
You heard me. You heard me, and I don't care that you heard me.
Well, you need to go find you some sassafras and harvest it and make you a good old-fashioned sarsaparilla.
I don't think I would like that.
Sarsaparilla is the I'm not sure which kind of root beer is the best.
Mugs, but continue.
No, that's brand. And no, Dog and Suds is better than Mug.
You know, I used to think that, but keep going.
Well, I actually have access to Dog and Suds where I am.
I think I need to do a side by side again now that I'm older.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah. So the two best kinds of root beer are, and I'm not sure what order they belong in, sarsaparilla and ginger beer.
Okay.
And today, nothing is called sarsaparilla, and sarsaparilla is the only thing that's still called root beer. So they changed the name. They just called it root beer. None of the other root beers are called root beer.
None of the other root beers are called root beer.
All the other root beers are just given their name. Ginger beer, spruce beer, stuff like that. And sarsaparilla is called root beer, and not so it doesn't have its name. It's called the general name, and all the others don't get the general name anymore. And I don't know what makes any of them special.
I don't know. I also will go one further.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care, but I don't know.
Yes, I understand.
You ever seen a giant cockroach climb out of a tomato?
No, but I have had cock and bull ginger beer.
All right, we're not going to let that one go. Let's just keep moving. Anyways.
So it was before I knew what a cock and bull story was. I thought cock and bull ginger beer was just a hilarious play on cock and balls.
Which would be really funny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I would accept that as an answer.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you name this that? Oh, because cock and balls.
Why did you name him Butthole?
I'd be like, yeah, man. I'm down with it.
Mm-hmm.
Anyways, why in the world are we doing this morning?
Because we're the Super Whiskey Bros.
Oh. And since neither of us feel very super, and neither of us are drinking whiskey.
Does that mean we're not bros? Does that?
One can only hope so.
My life would improve.
True. So as of this moment in time, as of a different moment in time,
at the very same moment,
to a different moment in time yesterday, preparing for this moment in time today, you approached me and said, you know what we haven't done in a hot minute, because you talk like that.
I say those words a lot.
Those are words you say, and you're like, hey, yo, we haven't done love.
Yeah, just like Pink, I'm attracted to minutes. But yes, you're right. I did say those things, that we haven't done Lovecraft in a while. And so that's what we're doing. Tyler? You faded away and have not come back. Hello? Are you there? Tyler. Huh. Are you there?
That was the most beautiful thing ever. Because essentially it was just me droning, and then when you didn't answer, I kind of went on a little bit further. And then I went on a little bit further, and I kept getting slower and more awkward, and you never answered. I'm like, this is perfect. We're doing Lovecraft, damn it.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's been way too long since we've done anything Lovecraft related. I guess we did that Lovecraft video game. Anything that from actual Lovecraft. And
from actually Lovecraft.
Yeah.
Actually.
Now, before we've done some of his stories, and they may have been, popular ones or whatever, today we're going over the one Lovecraft story that none of you have heard of.
No, it's very niche.
Very, very obscure of one of his stories. If you've ever read Lovecraft, it's probably the very last of his stories you've read, if you've even found it at all.
It goes not to recommend it.
It goes by the title, "The Shadow over Innsmouth."
Yeah, it's not widely celebrated.
Yes.
So yeah.
I think we're bad, very bad at the dry sarcasm, because I don't think anyone believed a word we just said there.
No, that is kind of the benchmark. So this is actually my favorite.
Mm-hmm.
It was originally my favorite for the longest time. I guess I would, if I had to really sit and reevaluate, I might. But for the longest time, this was definitely my favorite. I liked the approach to the story. It gives you the slow burn that is characteristic of a lot of his stories, which is nice. It gives you what was I trying to say here? It gives you words are so much easier when you haven't slept for 2 hours.
Mm-hmm.
It gives you that the kind of POV that you get from all the really, really good ones. I mean, like, the really, really good ones have that, like, from the perspective of the person who's slowly becoming privy to the ancient knowledge and all that kind of stuff. And this one has a really good twist ending, which you kind of get in one of their Lovecraft story, but this is the best version of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So there's a there's a style that he used here that he's used in a I can't think of another story where he's used this exact style.
Have I lost you or not?
I don't know. I'm speaking. I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I'm blaming you. It's your fault.
Okay. Are you there though? I mean, am I there for you?
I can. Well, you are now there for
okay.
me.
Uh-huh.
I've always been there for you.
Mm-hmm. I understand that. Yeah, it's written in a style that he hints at a lot, where he'll like it happens a lot that he doesn't use because like the there's no quotes as far as I know for the for the protagonist, no quoted sentences at any point, so it never says blah 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 I said or anything like that. It's always, and there are relatively few quotes from other people besides unless like only the people that he wanted to get their speech mannerisms across, and Zadok, which I think that he instead of putting in the narrator's words, he only did Zadok in quotes because he wanted to get his speech mannerisms across. But those are the only people that get quotes. Everything else is like, and he told me that this and this and this and this and this and this, or and I said that this and this and this and this and this and this. It's always like the future, like the author in the future, or not the author, but the protagonist in the future, recounting what was said and putting it in his own words. And that kind of like lack of quote is actually something that pops up fairly often in Lovecraft stuff. He did the exact opposite in Pickman's Model, and where instead of the like it's almost, instead of it almost being like a journal entry where the guy is writing and there's hardly any quotes because he's just recounting everything. It's the exact opposite, where the guy is speaking directly to you, and it's as if you're the observer. So almost everything is a direct quote from the guy talking to you, and he asks you questions, and it makes it seem like you've answered the questions, but you still don't get any quotes. And it's kind of that's neat. That was Pickman's Model that did that. But there's always almost always somebody who is not silent, but they don't get any quotes. And
yes,
I like that.
Yeah, no, and I think if you think about the two people that actually get conversations, you have like you already mentioned Zadok Allen, and then you have the person at the very, very beginning who's telling him about Innsmouth. We get a conversation there with direct quotes, and I think it's interesting because it puts a lot, like you were saying, it puts a lot of gravity on those two particular conversations. So you have obviously Zadok Allen's conversations. You have all the way from Zadok Allen's conversation because he's giving you all the knowledge and everything. But then you have the ticket master guy. I believe it's a ticket master guy.
Yep.
Who essentially is he's the one who's telling him that here's what's going on with Innsmouth and here's why you shouldn't go and here's a few pieces of information. We hear about people that go crazy there. We hear a few about the things that make them, special and terrible. But then you don't, like you said, even the people who are nice to him, like the grocery boy, there's no conversation with them. They're just like, here's what happened. Here's what his life was like. He told me his life story. You don't need to hear the quotes, and you just kind of move on. And it is an interesting way to write, and he's rather okay at it.
Yeah. Well, he was.
He was not bad.
Yeah. What was it? Oh, there was something. Oh yeah, the Ticketmaster conversation though, that was a pretty. Actually, I'm not going to get into that. I'll give the short synopsis, and I'll include what I was going to say about the Ticketmaster in my short synopsis.
Yes, the synopsis.
So the story goes as follows. Hey, I was traveling down the road and I realized that I had to get somewhere. And I was in Newburyport, and I had to get somewhere, so I went to the ticket booth. I said, hey, I'd like a train. And he said, oh, the train's too expensive for you. And I said, oh, you're right. I said, well, you could take the bus through Innsmouth, but I wouldn't recommend it. Okay, well, why wouldn't you recommend it? Oh, because it's a terrible place, bad things happen, and it's been that way since the War of 1812. Oh, well, that's terrible. Yeah, but you should go there anyway, because I'm from Vermont, and I don't believe in nonsense, so go ahead and go. And then I went to a place and I saw some jewelry and I was like, oh, that's some pretty jewelry. They said, yeah, it's Innsmouth jewelry. So, oh, that's neat. And then I went to Innsmouth and the guy who drove me there was mighty weird. And so I showed up and I went to the hotel and I said, hey, let me leave my bag here while I explore the town. Okay, so I went and explored the town and I talked to a grocery boy and he said, everybody's weird here. How am I normal? I wish I was here. Please get me out. I live in Arkham. And so he which, by the way, side note, I bet that grocery boy died. I bet I bet the in the end when everybody went out in force, I bet they found him and killed him. But
that seems like a high probability.
Yeah. But anyways, he said, yeah, but I hate it here. This is the worst place ever. Let me draw you a map. And so I was happy to get that map, and so I got the map and I went around and I was exploring and I saw nothing, and that scared me. And I also saw a man in a basement, and that scared me. And I'm just a cowardly man, really. And while I was terrified over seeing a man in a basement and also seeing nothing, I came across an old man named Zadok. I said, "Hey, that's Zadok. I heard about Zadok." And I said, "Hey, Zadok, how's it going?" And he said, "More ale, winch." And so I brought him some booze, and he drank it, and then he drank it, and then he drank it. And it wasn't until he drank about all my booze, what a hog, that he started speaking, and he said, "You know, Obed Marsh, you look a lot like him, by the way. He was doing poorly, and then he talked to some islanders, and the islanders said, 'Oh yeah, no, we're not doing poorly.' And so he wanted to know why, because he was doing poorly. And they said, oh, it's because of these fish folk. And so Captain Marsh said, oh, fish folk, okay. That's so silly. And then things got worse, and he said, oh, there may be something to those fish folk. And so he got with the fish folk, and then he was trading with the people, and he met the fish folk, and then someone came and killed all the people. And he's like, oh crap, how did I get the fish folk? And then he threw some lead in the water and a dead body. And then the fish folk came, and he's like, okay, so here's what needs to happen. I need to keep throwing dead bodies in the water. And they said, well, what about if there's a live person? I said, well, then I'll make them into a dead body and then throw them in the water. And then they said, no, you're not gonna do that. And so they took him away, and they wouldn't let him do it anymore. And then the fish folk didn't like that, so they came and they killed a bunch of people. And then they said, okay, tell you what, we'll stop throwing dead bodies in the water, and the fish folk you stop killing us if we have sex with you. And somehow the fish folk went for that.
All right.
And then they and then so they wound up having a bunch of half fish, half person kids, and there's a bunch of kids that way, but Zadok was having none of it, and he didn't like sex, and so he went on his merry way. But because his initial refusal to have sex with the fish folk led to him telling about the existence of a Shoggoth, and so they killed him. And then he was that frightened me, so I went back to the hotel and I said, "Hey, I'd like to get on the bus now." And they said, "Oh, the bus is broke." I said, "What's wrong with it?" It has a 24-hour bug. It'll be ready tomorrow. Just go get some sleep." And I said, "Okay, that's weird. I've never heard of that happening on a bus." And so I got in my room and I said, "You know what? They're probably trying to pull a fast one on me," so I didn't go to sleep. And I found that my lock was broken, but I'm a handyman with a special key ring, so I fixed it. And so I locked my door and I bolstered everything, and then they tried to come in my room. I said, "Who's there?" They said, "Room service." And I didn't believe them. I fell for that trick before.
I didn't order any room service.
And so I thought, they'll leave me alone if I go to the next room over. And so I went to the next room over, and they didn't leave me alone. They tried to go into that room too. And so I thought, I'll jump out the window, which is really, this man will go to long lengths not to have sex.
True.
And so he jumped out the window, or I jumped out the window. This is a first-person story, isn't it? I go to long lengths not to have sex.
Let's stay pure out here.
And so I jumped out the window and I landed on the on a building, and I hopped into the building and went through, and then I was like, okay, I can sneak away. I'll follow the railroad. Even, I'll just walk on the railroad. And then they said, someone was about to see me. I said, I know, I'll pretend to be a fish. And so, how do fishes walk? And I started trying to walk like a fish, and I guessed correctly because they fell for it. And then I hid on the railroad tracks while a million fish came running through the field after me, and they all ran right past me and didn't see me. And then I went to Arkham, and I told everyone about the fish. And even though they hadn't believed anyone for 100 years, they believed me, and they went and they torpedoed the bad place, and they burned the town, and they did all that. And then it turns out I'm a fish, and my fish grandmother contacted me in a dream and said, "Hey, remember when you had all our people killed and bombed our town underwater and all that? Well, we forgive you, and we'd like you to come live with us when you become full fish." And I was like, "Oh, I don't know about that." And he said, "Well, my son killed myself." And I was like, "Oh, my uncle killed himself. You must be my real grandma." And so I am going to break my fish cousin out of the asylum he's in, and I'm going to go live underwater. The end. And this is actually the only Lovecraft story that I can think of right off the top of my head with a flat, absolute happy ending.
It is kind of a happy ending, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
Also, this is also the only time that we've ever done a synopsis that was, one, not short, and two, actually what happened.
Yeah.
Not exactly our MO.
Yeah, the funny thing is, it sounds like I phrased it comically. I really didn't. That's kind of how it happened. I mean,
it's more just like, what if you were just a very dry Britishman?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's essentially the plot of the thing. See you guys later. Have a good day. Drink some caffeine, plenty of water, stay hydrated.
Oh my goodness, Pat! But what if it rains?
Yes. So for this particular story, it's words are hard. The difference for this one, in this one for me, that's what I'm trying to say, the way that we go about the exposition is so much neater, cleaner maybe, than all of the other Lovecraft stories. None of it seems ridiculous. All of this seems like a... But I can't believe we haven't had a better movie made about this book, I guess is what I'm saying. Because this would be such an easy short film to make. Because the exposition is so clean. It's so simple. You have a nice, like, clean intro and exit from every single little bit of scene that you could just really... I don't know, it translates so well. Some of it, the Lovecraft stuff is like, there's this big long thing, and here's all the stuff that happened. It's all very convoluted. No one would think, but this is just the best written version of all of that. That's the reason why I'm so drawn to it.
Plus, for a movie, all you'd need is like for a low budget. If you're doing a low budget deal, all you would need for a short film to make in this one, this story in particular. To make the monsters, you just need a good makeup artist and maybe a couple like prop makers, and that'd be it.
I was gonna say a bunch of CGIs of Nancy Pelosi, but that works too.
Yeah.
That's a joke. Yeah, you do it in just like a semi-old looking town. Just have a few people that are, look vaguely like fishes, and then do the makeup to make them look a little bit more like fishes. You wouldn't have to have... I don't know if you've watched any Lovecraft movies. I'm sure you have a few, but I don't know if you've watched like the more kind of art house ones that are out there. I
haven't even. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I haven't even seen the ones made by the Historical Society.
I don't. The funny thing is, those are the only ones I haven't seen. Because I've watched like a lot of really low budget garbage ones, and then obviously the higher budget ones. Not there's a baby chasing me.
Oh
Yeah.
But
sorry,
yeah,
I'm trying to talk to this baby. Yes. No, you wouldn't even have to act that well. I mean, I don't know if you've seen those. I'm saying it again for a fact. Apparently, but like the acting's never great, and that's okay. Like. I mean, if you want to make it, I would even make it look low budget. It would fit for something in that time frame. I can't imagine it would cost more than like $15,000 to make this movie.
Yeah, which is surprisingly cheap for a movie.
That's shockingly cheap for a movie.
Yeah, but yeah, and there's also not a whole lot of There's not a whole lot of those moments in the in this story too. Like they always have the Lovecraft is semi-famous for the very obvious to the reader, which that's actually, I think it's a good thing with his books, because it increases suspense. Because he does it in a way that doesn't make the person seem too stupid. They seem a little stupid, but not too stupid. Where the reader's always like, no, don't go in there. This is in there, and the character's like, so I went in there. And then
the thing happened.
Yeah. And you but you don't really have any of those moments in this book. Like it flows.
Okay, that's one of the points I was going to make. I'm not going to interrupt you, but very briefly.
Yeah.
The ones that the moments of that foreboding in this one, I mean, you get a little bit of the sense from like, you shouldn't go to Innsmouth, but then like you kind of had to.
Yeah.
So like it takes that moment out of it. You get them in the moments of everything points to this guy's one of the fish people.
Yeah.
Because you have like, you look just like. Hey, you know what you look just like? It's that kind of a thing.
Yeah, that's when the it kind of points a little bit, and of course you don't really get what any of that means until you get to the until you start talking about the people of Innsmouth being descendants of the fish people, and you've already heard a couple times and have probably forgotten that he had the marsh eyes and stuff.
Yes, but again,
Yeah.
if this is like one of your first Lovecraft stories, then you're right, it's perfect. If you've read 3 or 4 already, you're gonna be like, oh, I know where this is going.
Yeah. And it's cool because it does play into it's one of those things that, you know, I do like this in a book where the twist, if you want to call it that, is you're reading and then you get to the point and said, and here's the reveal, and you go, and that's the thing they said before, and they were hinting at that, and it's like, oh, I should have caught that.
That's why they said the thing.
Yeah, a bad twist is, oh, yep, called that. A good twist is, oh, I should have seen that.
Or a twist that makes you want to burn 4 books is one where instead of everyone having somewhat of an ending that makes any kind of sense at all, the main guy goes off with a dragon in the middle of nowhere.
Mm-hmm. Especially when it was just determined that he learned the power to shape the universe. So yes, he was destined to do that thing, but he is literally able to change destiny by having the power of the universe.
Christopher.
You're a good writer, Christopher. Why'd you do it?
We're still mad, and it's been like 15 years. A good compromise leaves everyone upset anyways, but Lovecraft generally has the endings where it's right off of what you said, where it's like, I should have seen that coming. With Lovecraft, it's always, I saw that coming. Like, you just, it's an interesting way of writing because you have someone who's writing horror for people who have never read horror. Is kind of what it is. No one had read, obviously, this exact type of stuff that he was doing. It was different. It was very different, and I think he was trying to get these people hooked from the very beginning because it's a different style than what they're used to, and I think it worked very well. It's what made him. I mean, what popularity he did have back then, which was obviously very, very minimal, was probably for the people who are like, wow, like you start reading it and this sense of foreboding starts right away.
Yeah, and it's just so cool because, like, you know, I didn't realize this until I got to reading his books. He really is, like, even though he wasn't noticeably popular while he was alive, but he really is the father of modern and postmodern American horror and science fiction.
Yes.
It's so cool.
Well, and you say for modern, you will not find anyone who writes modern horror, even the really, really woke ones, are always like, everything that I did was inspired by this or by this thing, or maybe they'll say it a little bit more tentatively so they don't get canceled right away. But like Stephen King, I mean, like, we talk about someone who is the current kind of horror master that's still around and still writing. I'm not a big Stephen King fan. I don't read a lot of his stuff. I don't care a ton, but I mean, it's pretty. It's not exactly disputed that he is the most widely accepted horror author of our time. And he's like, yeah, I owe everything to Lovecraft. Like, I write everything the way that I do because Lovecraft.
Yeah, I think it's
or
fair.
He'll cite someone else who was inspired by Lovecraft.
Yeah, I think it would be fair to call him the biggest and most popular author, period, of our time. I don't think that would be unfair to call him that.
Oh, Stephen King?
Yeah, Stephen King, yeah. I was like, I've never read a single one of his books, but yeah.
I've read a little and I just don't care about it. It's just not my thing. I probably should, at least so I can pretend like I care more. I don't know. But yeah, like, you have the most influential people in this genre now point to him and go, yeah, it's all because of him.
It's, yeah, no. H.P. Lovecraft is to horror and science fiction both what Tolkien is to fantasy and the modern fairy story.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think that's a good parallel because for fantasy being a much larger and more read genre than horror, it makes sense that they're both equally as popular within their own realms.
Mm-hmm.
And we're already digressing. We're very good at this.
Yeah.
What
Well,
are we getting at?
we were talking about the way that he wrote the twist in this book was actually very good and very believable. And also, I know Howard likes to recycle names, but I don't know about that, Arlie.
Yeah, the hamster is awake, so we are screaming to the hamster.
Ah, yes.
That's Hermione.
So wait, you're screaming to the hamster, and that's why I can hear her screaming back.
Sure.
I was calling Arlie a hamster. Yeah, that hamster must be delicious though, because she keeps saying umami every time she looks at it. Yeah. But but one thing he I know he likes to do is he likes to recycle names, and so this is an instance of recycling names. But I don't like to think of it that way. I don't like to think of his names as being recycled. I say, like, whenever I see the same name, I will draw a connection, and I want the connection to be there.
Yeah, so when you said he recycles names, I had that answer locked and loaded.
Yeah. Because I think to an extent he is just recycling names, but to an extent he wants the connection. And so let's talk about the extreme. So I think though that when there is a big connection to something, when there's a big connection between two things, I like to think of there being some kind of influence there. And what I mean by that is this: I think there is an Innsmouth influence on Charles Dexter Ward. There are some powers that be at Innsmouth that is influencing what's going on there. Because how else would you have an Orn involved? And it was a Waite, right? The guy who owned the asylum, was he a Waite or a Gilman? Either way, he was one of the Innsmouth names.
Gilman, but yes.
Okay, but yeah, and so now you have Simon Orn involved, and you have Dr. we'll say Gilman involved with what's going on there, and I like to believe that wasn't recycling names. I like to think that he put those names in there on purpose, not just to say, hey, look, these names are here, but like saying, like, hey, yeah, the powers that be at Innsmouth are influencing the goings on here. And so I like to think of, I like to think of the, and also no, it is the powers that be at Innsmouth, because the esoteric cult of Dagon, it's technically not Dagon that they are worshipping. The common consensus, right, is that they use Dagon as the term because it's the term they know, because it's a term that is it was previously a Christian town, and that's a term that pops up in the Bible. And so that's just what they called it, given, because it's the fish god, and they know that existed in the Bible, and so that's the term they use. But it's actually the deep ones and the esoteric cult of Dagon actually worship Cthulhu, and of course, they're not exactly friendly, but they're related to the point that they're not friendly with each other, but their end goals are close enough to the same that I could see the influence spilling over, because the Orn, Simon Orn, and the main antagonist in Charles Dexter Ward. Why can't
Charles Dexter Ward?
No, his great grandfather. Yeah. Yeah. Curran? No. I thought it was. Is it not Curran?
You asked me too early, and I wasn't prepared for this question.
Oh well, that's fine. Um, uh, wow, slipped my mind. But he, but it's heavily implied that their science slash magic, because science and magic are the same thing, comes from Nyarlathotep. And I can see even though they worship Cthulhu, you can kind of see a Nyarlathotep influence on Innsmouth. So like it's very much he's even if he's never named, he seems to be a background character in every Lovecraft story except for maybe Sweet Ermengarde.
Well, even then, I would say it's still possibly the mental influence. Well, it's not that I disagree. I don't think you're making a bad point. I just think I do think it's intentional. That is the esoteric order of Dagon, because technically speaking, all of those people should be able to trace their lineage from Dagon.
Yeah,
is the reason why I think that that's legitimate. Yes, they're like essentially cults. They would have multiple entities, gods that they would worship, and obviously Cthulhu in the realm of if you just think about if you think about who would a cult like that worship, yes, it would be Cthulhu, but it would also be all these other outer gods that they'd be aware of. They would just the order of Dagon would make most sense because that's their direct lineage. So I think that they probably do it's just both.
Well, also given given the similarities, I think even in the very very short story Dagon, I like saying Dagon.
It's wrong. But keep going. I wasn't going to correct you.
Dagon.
Dagon.
Even in the short story there, like just the similarities to how he pops up on the island that isn't there. And how it's the exact same as randomly finding Relia in Call of Cthulhu. Like I honestly think that Dagon in the story Dagon, I still believe that was also Cthulhu, and it was another person, maybe even at the same time, that just stumbled upon Relia when it was out of the water for some reason.
You're too deep into the lore there. I don't think that's the case. I do like the Nyarlathotep thing is essentially if this is the reason why Lovecraft's mythos is so engaging to me is you can make those points.
Yeah,
you can say like I actually think that because of what we know about the outer gods or the old ones or all these individuals, because of what we know about them, we think that this is what's happening here behind the scenes of the story that the writer is not privy to. And like the thing about Nyarlathotep pulling the strings in all of these different stories lines up with that character. And Nyarlathotep's always been my favorite of all of the antagonists, just because it's the most interesting one. And it's so good because, like you're saying there, this Nyarlathotep is actually the one that was pulling the strings here, and he was influencing this thing here and this stuff. And the reason why that's so fun to think of is because you have like the people's other theories that are saying, well, all this stuff is real, and he's an impersonator, and he's trying to trick people. Like, it was Nikola Tesla, it was this particular pharaoh, it was this character in history, and you're like, I can't tell you that you're wrong, because, it's one of those things like, well, technically speaking, you can't completely disprove to me that this was the case, and it's in line with what this fictional character would do, so it's a really cool way to make up all these little stories.
Yeah, no, that's a person said. Someone said that. It said every religion is actually this religion, and so like in that context, Nyarlathotep is Satan, and in the Lovecraft mythos that is true. Anytime you hear anyone deal with the devil, it's always Nyarlathotep.
Yeah.
But there was someone who went way further with that. I was talking about all the different guises of Nyarlathotep, and one of them was Sauron. And my question, and that sounds pretty neat, but my question to that person, that Nyarlathotep is Sauron, or the other way around, is if Sauron is Nyarlathotep, who's Morgoth?
Yeah. There's a bunch of... That's kind of funny. But no. Yeah, well, there seems like there's got to be another point of this story that we haven't talked about that we need to talk about, or that I was going to talk about, and I am struggling to remember what it would have been.
While you're thinking of that, I'm going to go back to my point that I believe that Dagon is Cthulhu. I'll tell you what I actually think happened there. I would still like to believe that it's the same entity in this case because it lines up too well. But here's what I actually think happened. Lovecraft wrote a really tiny, short 2-page story about a guy who stumbled upon an island that wasn't there and found a mystical, incredibly evil aquatic monster. And then he did it and he read it and he said, "I really like that story," and he called it Dagon. And then he thought, I like that idea, and it didn't make a whole lot of sense, so I'm going to write a full-length story, I'm going to reuse that concept, and I'm going to include it in my mythos in a way that makes a lot more sense, is what I think actually happened.
It's very possible. What's funny about all of that is it actually, like, that's one of his more well-known ones, is Dagon.
Yeah.
Probably because it's so easy to digest, and it's just so brief. There's very little going on in it, which makes it, by the way, a perfect story. I mean, like, you have an entire, you have the entire technically beginning, middle, and end. You get a point across all the way, and it just takes minutes to read.
That is something that, oh man, you need to read. You need to read Lord Dunsany. It's his.
You told me that before.
Yeah, his mythos, it's hard to find a book version of the complete mythos. There's an audiobook of the complete mythos, but it's a compilation of stuff. So he has the Gods of Pegana is his main mythos book, but then he has story collections, and there will be like a couple mythos stories popped throughout the collections of his short stories. But he's the one that influenced Lovecraft to write this way. I like Lovecraft a little bit better, but it's so cool to see the influence, and I like the way Dunsany writes. But you're never told that this person did this, and this person has this personality, this person is acting like this. You find out who the gods are and kind of what they do, not by being told what they're doing, but as soon as they do it, it has an impact on the world. And you're told what that impact is, and that's really all you're told about them. So, like, the gods stood up, and this god, and the god Arshafaz stood and made the sign of Arshafaz. And the town was no more. It's like, okay, this guy destroys things, you know? And that's how it goes, and it's actually really interesting. All you know about anything is just the things that they did caused something, and you're told what they caused, and it's really neat. And Lovecraft does the same thing. All you really know about these monsters until later, sometimes you get more information about them, but until you get that information, all you know about them is just the impact that they had.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, it's never like, and the monster killed this man. It's, this person went to where the monsters was, and I never saw him again. You know, that's the impact. The impact is that guy is gone. You know, you don't know, did they tear him apart? Did they stab him? Did they have sex with him? I mean...
all of the above.
Yes, and so they, gives a whole new meaning to stabbing, I suppose. Yeah, and it's
poked him repeatedly.
Haha. But and it's neat. I'll keep I'll keep loving on Dunsany, specifically because because of his great influence on Lovecraft. But he actually is. He was really good too. And you see that you do see that a lot in Shadow over Innsmouth, especially in the stories of especially in the stories that Zadok is telling, the way he recounts it, because all he knows is, since he didn't actually see anything happen, he saw hints and clues of things, and then he saw the impact. And so he's talking about the impact that all these things had. And I think that adds more. It's a Dark Souls story, right? I mean, that is what it is, and I don't think. I'm not going to read too much into that. Like, I know Miyazaki was a huge Lovecraft fan, but I'm not going to say. And Dark Souls, there are Lovecraft inspirations, but that's just another term of another way to put it, to understand it. I don't think the influence was that big. But that it's the same kind of thing. You're going around, you're exploring, and you see the impact that the stuff happened, and how you learn the story is by picking up clues that people left behind. You know, mm-hmm. It's all about you came after the story happened, or the story happened either a long time ago or right before you got there, and now you're doing and now your story is a sub story that's just picking up clues about the story, and that's kind of the way Lovecraft is too. And I love it.
Yeah, it's there's got to be a better way to say this than I'm trying to say it. Mm-hmm. It's like a journalistic approach to mm-hmm. finding out all the clues mm-hmm. And finding out everything about the story. Because the exposition is always from like, oh, I found this little thing. I mean, and the greatest example of that, obviously, is always going to be the Call of Cthulhu. Mm-hmm. But I mean, you find that in all, especially the ones that have time. So you like your longer, the longer Lovecraft stories that actually have the ability to take their time for him to lay it out in that way. He really does. You can clearly see that's his favorite way of storytelling, because like you have Mountains of Madness, which is essentially that to a T, but like completely scientifically. And then you have, like, as the stories get shorter from there, like it's a little bit less and less of it, but it's always there. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Oh, I just saw a thing on here. It has nothing to do with that. I'll have to talk to you about this later. But yeah, no, that's it's I don't know. I love his storytelling. I don't know what it is that draws me in so much, or if it's just a perfect combination of both, or if it's one over the other. I honestly don't know. I'm not that introspective, but I don't know if it's his stories that I love so much. I do like his stories, or if it's his storytelling that's the thing that really pulls me in and keeps me. They're both phenomenal, but there's got to be, because that's the way the people are. There's one thing that you like over about anything else. And I don't know what it is out of those two. Like the interconnectability of his stories, even unintentional, even probably unintentional. Man, and I wish I knew what book this was, but it was the first book to really go into the mythos of the Miskatonic Valley specifically. This is talking about the interconnectability of it, and this goes into everything Lovecraft, even his personal attitude. I cannot think of what the story was, but it was the first story that really went into the details of that really started the mythos of the Miskatonic Valley. And it was a rewrite of someone else's story, or someone wrote a story that was supposed to have these plot points, and Lovecraft read it, and he didn't like it, and he I guess he wanted to give the guy feedback, and the dude wouldn't listen to him, so Lovecraft rewrote that story in a way that wasn't plagiaristic. He just said, I saw that story and I wanted to write a better version of it. So he wrote the story, made a better version of it, made it popular, created the Miskatonic Valley mythos, and then sent a letter to all of his writer friends and said, "Hey guys, I created this this thing here. It's open source. Write whatever you want in this universe. Do whatever you want. Make money off of it. Flesh this out." And that's when that's when Derleth really took off writing Cthulhu mythos with Lovecraft. Was when that happened too.
Yeah, and it was really I think the most incredible thing about Lovecraft really is his his correspondence with other people is what was really incredible. Just because the sheer amount of it, for one thing, is absolutely incredible. But then his willingness to, like, I mean, think of any other author in history that was this much like, yeah, keep writing the story that I'm writing. Like, yeah, do more of that. Let's do, what do you think the best way to do is? I think the best way that you could continue writing my stories to kind of go vaguely down this line, but kind of do your own thing with it. I would do this and this. You should do this. And you have, like, not only is he allowing people to write his story, he's encouraging it and helping them to do it. I mean, it's awesome, but that's crazy. Like, that people don't do that.
Speaking of his correspondence, have you read the poem that he wrote as a Christmas on the Christmas card that he sent to Lori Sawyer?
I don't know.
Okay, here you go. I will read to you his Christmas poem that he sent to Lori Sawyer.
Okay.
As Christmas snows, as yet a poet's trope, call back one's bygone days of youth and hope. 4 metric lines I send, they're quite enough, though once I fancied I could write the stuff.
Quite good. Short, sweet, to the point.
And also, this is I guess back when they were more amicable. A Christmas card that he sent to Sonia H. Green. So here you go. Here's a Christmas poem that he wrote for her back when back before she was a raging cunt.
It couldn't have been that long before.
Yeah, that's true. Once more the ancient feast returns, and the bright hearth domestic burns. With Yuletide's added blaze, so too may all your joys... Oh, okay, so... I see what... Okay, this is a very interesting rhyme scheme. I'm going to start from the beginning. Here we go. Once more the ancient feast returns, and the bright hearth domestic burns, with Yuletide's added blaze. So too may all your joys increase, midst floods of memory, love, and peace, and dreams of halcyon days.
That's the same. Wow, that's a bit of a nerd moment. That's the same rhyme scheme as Bilbo's poem that he wrote for the feast at when the feast for the hobbits arriving at Rivendell.
Mm-hmm. And what's funny about that is because of when Lovecraft's letters were published and stuff. I don't think there was any Lovecraft to Tolkien influence.
I would doubt it. Yeah.
Yeah, because they both had similar influences, but I don't think Lovecraft at any point influenced Tolkien, and these wouldn't have been published by then anyway. So it's just a interesting rhyme scheme. Speaking of rhyme schemes, I freaking love the the dwarves song, the rhyme scheme for that, because the rhyme scheme goes a internal BB a.
I love a good internal BB. First of all,
internal BB, yeah. So we have far over the misty mountains cold, to dungeons deep and caverns old. We must away ere break of day, to seek the pale enchanted gold. And every stanza is that way. A, A, B, B, A. I love it.
And I think that's not the only one in his lexicon that does that either. It's a theme he comes back to, which is pretty cool. Like, he goes to that type of rhyming scheme for some of the let me rephrase. He goes back to rhyming schemes and keeps them for the different peoples that are similar to it. So the more sophisticated rhyming schemes he saves for, like, the elves and the dwarves, because they're older peoples. But then he always goes back to a hobbit one. It's like this really simplistic, straight ahead, like, just back and forth, and it's always super basic, which is really funny to me, because he's like these younger, this younger people that is less sophisticated. He even has a less sophisticated rhyme scheme. I was thinking that the other day, because I'm doing my yearly Lord of the Rings read through again. Is the reason why I'm thinking of all of it.
Or you have Bilbo's translation of the Fall of Gil-galad, which
just laying around.
Which rhymes. And then he also has the Sindarin version of the Fall of Gil-galad, which rhymes.
That's not how that would work.
No, because it's very interesting, because if you look at the direct translation from Sindarin for the Fall of Gil-galad, it doesn't make any sense. Like, it's like, instead of Gil-galad was an elven king, the direct Sindarin translate, because it's implied that Bilbo translated it and changed the wording around to make it rhyme, to make it back into a song. And so if you look, like, Gil-galad was an elven king, of him the harpers sadly sing. And that line there, the Sindarin goes more like, King Elven Gil-galad is, and then / was. And then because it makes it seem like Sindarin is an incomplete language like Latin, which it is, but he really made it, like, the way that he put, like, the lines and the parentheses and stuff, makes it seem like you're supposed to understand that these words belong here, but they don't exist. Right. I said so. Him of sing Harper's sadness, and it's like, but it's like the way it's weird, because the way it's translated is how you would expect Latin to be translated, and then you take it, and it keeps the same meter and the same rhyme scheme, and the fact that he did that, the fact that he wrote it, he made it rhyme. I'm sure he wrote it first in English, and then he said, okay, but now let's write it in Sindarin. And he did it in Sindarin in a way that would make sense in Sindarin, and kept the same meter, and kept the same rhyme scheme. Okay, either way, though, we're not talking about we are talking about Lovecraft. We're not...
I was going to say we digress, but we always digress, so...
If we didn't digress, we wouldn't be the Super Whiskey Bros. Okay, let's end on let's end on Lovecraft's best Christmas poem, and then we'll be gone.
Joke's on you, I was already gone.
There is snow on the ground, and the valleys are cold, and a midnight profound blackly squats over the wold. But a light on the hilltops half-seen hints of feastings unhallowed and old. There is death in the clouds, there is fear in the night, for the dead in the shrouds hail the sun's turning flight, and a chant in the woods, as they dance round a Yule altar, fungus and white. To no gale of earth's kind sways the forest oak, where the sick boughs entwined by mad mistletoes choke, for these powers are the powers of dark from the graves of the lost druid folk. And mayst thou to such deeds be an abbot and priest, singing cannibal greeds at each devil-wrought feast, and to all the incredulous world showing dimly the sign of the beast.
I was waiting for him to say the N word.